Welcome to Camp Conversations Parenting Edition. I'm your host, Dayna. I have a master's in counseling psychology, a background in clinical counseling, and teaching. This is a podcast chock full of resources for parents, grandparents, educators, social workers, anyone that works with children. So sit back, relax, and let's start today's conversation. Hi everyone, I am so excited today to introduce Samara Ohm. She's back again after our live together and our live workshops. And you guys had more questions that you want me to ask her, which we will approach today. But for those of you that haven't met her yet, Samara is a registered dietitian. She has a master's of science. She is also a mom of a young one. And we really connect over looking at children and parents through this holistic lens and knowing that our mental and our physical health is always interconnected, and we never approach challenges just from a standpoint of fixing the behavior, but from understanding what is going on behind that specific behavior, whether it is a behavioral challenge with friends or a behavioral challenge with food. And just to lead in, Samara, the three things that my audience is asking you to touch on with me today are talking about how things have changed for you in your clinical approach since having children. And then secondly, rewards and punishments and their relation to food and finishing dinner at the dinner table with the family and whether or not you use them, and if so, how. And then thirdly, looking at food as a reward. So like bribing with food and whether that is a positive, negative, or neutral thing. Before we jump into this first question, is there anything that you want to add to that introduction? Did I leave anything out?
No, I think those are, yeah, thank you for the introduction. And I feel like those 3 points are, yeah, they kind of interconnect and can be really tricky. And sometimes we can default to like how we were raised, even though most parents want to break cycles. So I think those ones in particular, like, especially in those vulnerable moments or when you're impatient and you're like, just eat this and you'll get ice cream or whatever. Like we've all been there. So I think this is a good topics to chat about today.
Amazing. And what a great segue, because I'm curious, first off, if with your relationship to food and coaching clients and patients, do you think that you defaulted more to how you were raised before? Like, did it change before or after having kids, or has that like always been something that you've been aware of?
Yeah, I think I'm more intentional now just because I have no like that knowledge and like I was very fortunate to be brought up in a pretty yeah, pretty like healthy and grounded environment when it came to meal times. And I wasn't really a picky eater growing up, to my knowledge. So I think I definitely probably have taken a lot of what I learned from like my parents, but I didn't have any strong things of like, oh, I absolutely will not do that. And now, since learning more about like eating and feeding with the family, just with what I use in practice, I think I am more intentional for sure about how I feed my daughter because it's really not as easy as we think. It's like something that's so natural, like, oh, I feed my kid and not a big deal. It's like, it is, it's really hard. Like,
Mhm.
I didn't think it would be so hard, but it is. So, trying to use what I learned, but also nuance it based off of what's happening in my home and with my family that day. Like, it always looks a little bit different. Um, so, yeah.
Can you think of any examples of something that you used before as a tool if parents came to you about like their child around nutrition or picky eating that you're like, yeah, this is just a go-to strategy, and now that you have your own daughter, you're like, so that is the go-to strategy, and I'm not sure whether like I can put it in practice every day.
Yeah, I think like a big one is being really being like structured with meals providing a food that you know that they will like and then that they will eat, and then the other things they don't have to eat it, but like you're not going to be a short order cook. And I was like very passionate about that. And then when you're in those moments of like they haven't eaten much today, I want them to sleep really well, I'm just gonna make this toast and peanut butter or give them their smoothie. And yeah, so that's like been a big one where I'm like, I am doing the things that maybe I would recommend against. But sometimes you have to do what you have to do. And sometimes you're in a bit of survival mode when your kid is sick or you're sick or, you know, you're single parenting. Like there's just sometimes you need to make it work. So that is probably like my biggest one is I definitely do cater a little bit more than what I would like to. Um, but also I think it depends on what age your kid is too. Like my I have a toddler, she's a year and a half. So it's like we're in this weird position where I'm like, she doesn't really know, but I'm like, oh, she does. She's smart. She knows what she's doing. Like she knows she'll get a banana if she doesn't like eat this. And we're in like a really tricky time right now with picky eating and yeah, so it's frustrating.
I think it's really validating to hear or like hear you say that, like knowing that you're a professional and then also hearing you say we're in a tricky time
Mhm.
around food. I mean, for me, I can't speak for the other parents listening, but that's just like, ah, okay. So it's not a sign that I'm doing something completely wrong.
Yeah, definitely not.
And as you were talking too, I was vigorously nodding because I think going before being a parent, I was like, you just put the food in front of your children and they have like you have the choice around what it is and they have the choice around whether or not they eat it. And like you said, there are some times where I'm like, I know we're going here, I know I have to go to work, I know you have to go to school, or I know that you really need sleep tonight and I am going to use a bribe in there. Like we are going to say, and I was very passionately against rewards and consequences around food before having kids, and then understanding that there are times where you need those quick fix strategies and that is okay.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. It's I think you have your kind of toolkit and sometimes you need to sometimes we're rifling through it quickly to problem solve. Um, but I think also being organized is really huge. Like that's something I talk to parents a lot with. And I know it is so hard when we're like stretched thin and you're trying to just get through the days, but sitting down with your partner and like if you or unless you're single parenting, whoever is like part of your kid's life, I think that's something I've tried to pull in is like what's the plan, like let's have a plan so we're both on board, you know being willing to experiment, even going into dinner time being like okay, this is what's for dinner, we're going to see how this goes. And that, so yeah, organization I think is a big thing that maybe I wouldn't have thought about before with, um, like, there's organization of grocery shopping and what you're cooking, but like organized in like your plan of how you're going to feed your child. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so then, because sometimes too, when you're in those like moments of tension or you're sleep deprived, and then you're like at your partner, she's like, "What the heck? Why did you give them a pouch? Like we have this that I need her to eat." So I think that is something too that's really important to bring into your house is talking through what could work, what couldn't, and reading different tips and tricks, like asking friends what they're doing, because we don't want to be flying by the seat of our pants like all the time, right? Because you don't want to get to that point where you're like, oh no, we've really built some bad habits and now we have to like backtrack a lot.
Mm-hmm. And I really like that. I think prior to having kids, I always felt like schedule and organization was this like ugly word that I wanted to like I wanted to steer away from that because that's just not my personality. And then since having kids, I've realized there's a whole lot of flexibility in having those kind of not specific time schedules, but a routine around food and around meals, kind of what we can expect. And I love how you said there's that really important piece of having collaboration with your partner, because I find in the families that I talk to that we so often don't proactively talk about these things. And the way we were raised pops out in the mealtime. And so there might be one partner that's like, no, you have to eat everything before you leave the table. And another partner that's like, no, they can have what they want and then the banana before bed. If
Mhm.
they're really figuring out what your values are around
For sure.
food.
Yeah, and I work with adults primarily, and sometimes I'll work with parents, and I'm not seeing them for like issues with their kids and eating. It's more them, but you can see how they've been impacted by the different dynamics at the table where they're like, I'm not really eating the meals I like at all because I'm adventurous and my husband and my kids are really picky. And so I'm feeling like they're really unsatisfied. And or
Mm.
like, my husband doesn't like this, so we don't eat it, even though I think it'd be positive for my health. And it's like, well, have you had those conversations of like, how can we make this work for everybody? And not to pull the gender card, but I think moms tend to make a lot of compromises and sacrifices. So yeah, I
Mm.
think those conversations are really an important part of.
Okay, well, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Maybe we should tie this into that second question of our audience around rewards and punishments around food. So around getting our kids to be healthy, or around if we do all of a sudden decide, like, you know what, I'm adventurous. This is going to be a family value. I want our family to be more adventurous around food.
Mm,
Where do rewards and punishments fall into that makeup? Do you utilize those at all, like in your practice? And if so, how do you use them?
yeah, I definitely would as a bit of a rule like try to refrain from even using that languaging of like reward and punishment, because as soon as we start tying that to food, that's when some, you know, unhelpful behaviors and relationship to food can start to develop, where we tie, right and wrong, or I was bad or good to food. Because then, especially with there's already massive risks with eating disorders with so many other things going on for kids. And so, you want to make sure it's a very open, welcoming space around food in your house. Get rid of the shame and yeah.
I love this because I think one of the things that is very common that I see with the families I interact with and when I was a teacher was around lunches and that kind of reward. And I think when we think reward and punishment, we think of like the really big, like gold star or go to your room kind of reward or punishment. And I think it can be really small in terms of like when kids come home and they have or haven't eaten their lunch, or they have only eaten the bear paw from their lunch and left the vegetables. And sometimes just our verbal feedback around that
Yes.
might be internalized. And so, what are your insights on that and where to go there?
I think it's good to be curious. So, when I talk to parents, sometimes it's like, are there other areas of your kid's life where he gets a bit fixated on certain things? Or, like, say, if kids who only eat like one food for 3 weeks or won't try things, and like, are they really hesitant in other areas of their life? Do they tend to be an observer before they try something new? And sort of just reminding yourself that like every kid is unique, and that shows up at the dinner table as well. And is the picky eating stemming from something else? Like I had a chat with a parent a couple weeks ago, and the kid was present, and I said, like, tell me about how food feels for you, because he's pretty selective eater. And he was like peas, just like the shape, the round shape in my mouth, it just doesn't feel right. So, and the mom was like, whoa, I've never heard him say that before.
Mhm.
So yeah, just trying to be curious, and rather than you didn't eat your lunch, it's like, oh, how did your day go? Like, did you have time to eat today? Or what can we put in your lunch tomorrow? And yeah, things like that. So yeah, rather than reward punishment, be curious, link it to their personality, I think is a big one. And then at the dinner table too, removing that pressure of like, if you don't eat this, then you can't do whatever. It's maybe talking about like, remember when you did that one thing that you didn't think you would like and it was really scary at first? Like sometimes eating can be like that too. So I think pulling in, oftentimes parents sort of like discount their parenting skills when it comes to eating, but it's like you can use those other strategies that you have in other aspects of parenting and use it at the table and try to remove that like pressure and stress around it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and if I can kind of tie that back to how like our audience has heard me talk about the camp piece before, when we're trying to make decisions reactively in the moment, that's when we tend to default to this like reward consequence space. Like, you didn't eat your lunch at school, so no, you can't have a different snack right now. You have to finish your lunch, or we're going to postpone dinner until lunch is done, whatever that might be, that could be internalized as consequence. I love, if I could paraphrase you, it would be going back to, okay, what are our family values when it comes to meals? And then can that be my decision making tool? And so if I value that my child, if I have a higher value that I raise a healthy, intuitive eater, well, then it makes it a little easier to drop the everyday battles around eat your broccoli today, because I know big picture, uh,
Mm-hmm.
I can expose them to broccoli a multitude of times. There's a chance that they're going to engage with it at some point, like we did when we were older, and then now many of us enjoy broccoli. Like, it's easier to look at big picture when we go from that value perspective, and it takes away that need of having to get in the, I think where I called it in our Instagram live, the banana drama, where like your child only wants to eat bananas and you're like, oh, this is forever and I need to force you to eat like something with more nutritional substance.
Yeah,
And from a value place, I can kind of pull back. No, I want this to come from them so that they learn the skills of noticing how their body reacts to different foods.
totally. Yes. Yeah. I think that's a big one. And also another value is like food waste. It can be really hard. Like I have like huge issues with food waste. So that's what times I'm like, I made you this thing. And I'm like, that's not on her. Like she didn't ask me to make her this fancy granola bar, like, so when kids are older, you could have that, like, I want to make sure we're not throwing food out because it's really expensive. Like, do you think we might eat this later? Like, is there a way that we can incorporate it into our day today or tomorrow? Like, what do you think we should do with your leftover lunch? Like,
Mm-hmm.
you is like, you're a team. Like, how can we address this problem together versus we're against each other? Because then, that's not helpful.
Yes, and I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but at 1.5, you could probably start taking some of those. I'm guessing that you probably already do this, action steps around the food waste of like, okay, I made these expensive granola bars, but maybe they're ones that I can also freeze and put them in the freezer and say that out loud so that becomes
Yeah.
like that your daughter's growing up in. Is that how you would approach something like that?
I haven't really thought about it. I think I need to start, yeah, narrating things a little bit more because of it's funny how suddenly you're like, oh, they're like not just a baby now, they're catching on. But
Mhm.
yeah, I think that's a good nudge for me to start to share that out loud.
Yeah, and I don't even know if whether the narrating every once in a while if we just do that and narrate, and then at other times just be modeling it. 'Cause
Mhm.
I think so often we separate the child world from the adult world. And if we can just connect them for a moment and go, yeah, if my like spouse narrated everything to me to try and instill that value in me, I please stop.
Really good point. Yeah.
But I really like that because as soon as you said that, I was like, wow, I actually do connect that value of food waste. And that is some of the stress that I carry in to
Mm,
meals with my kids, which sometimes push me to the bribe place of like, finish your, like, you have to finish X amount before you can have that treat before bed or treat afterwards.
mm.
Um, and then that leads me into my last question from our audience, which is around using food as a reward. And I'm so guilty of using the words treat in my house and healthy and not healthy. And I would just love to know a bit more about that and what I could be trying to do instead.
Yeah, the that's a really hard that's a really hard one to like dismantle as like treats. Because like
Mhm.
saying treat isn't like inherently bad, but if we're um using in the context of reward, then yeah, it might not be great because then there builds that expectation of like doing general helpful things like unloading the dishwasher, then I get a treat. And it's like that's not really how we want to move through life, like in childhood or adulthood. So the sort of the idea with that is like we don't want to dichotomize food into like good, bad, healthy, unhealthy, because typically that just builds like mystique around the unhealthy, bad foods. Kids will want it more. They'll feel maybe shame when they do eat it because, oh, my mom said this is bad. I shouldn't have it because it's bad for me. Like most of us can relate to being told we shouldn't do something, we're going to do it. So we want to just like neutralize food as much as we can.
Mhm.
Um, and there's different like schools of thought and sort of ways parents will use that. Like, I agree, it's good to try to level it, like neutralize it, but you can also have conversations around how food feels different in our body. Like, I think we need to be real that like a broccoli and an Oreo are not the same. Like,
Mhm.
you can still neutralize things, but they're not the same. So having those conversations around, we have foods for different reasons. How does it feel in your body? We want to make sure we're feeling energized, things like that. So you can still bring those sort of topics in, but yeah, ideally not using food as reward. I think on occasion, like whatever, it's not a big deal. It's a drop in the bucket, right? It's as you said, like bigger picture, zoom out. Is this really going to ruin my kid's relationship to food? Probably not.
Mhm.
Um, I've used it to get my kid in the car seat because sometimes it's a total nightmare to get here. Like a really active kid to sit down. And so if handing them a snack helps, like I've definitely done that. But yeah, I think just trying not to do like, if you do this, you will get this. Yeah.
Yeah, if there's any parents out there that don't have a car seat just surrounded by snacks, then
Yeah. So true.
I would love to hear your strategy.
Yeah.
And then I think, okay, so here's one relating to this. So, food as a reward. I think the way so many of us grew up, if we can bring it back to this first point of how things have changed since having our own kids, I think I continued on the habit before having my own kids of having something sweet after a meal. That
Mhm.
was just a habit that I grew up with that continued on. And then I had my own children and understood a little bit more around what kind of wording I'm using around food, how I'm utilizing food, whether and realizing that even for myself, I was using food as a reward for so much of my life, like having the ice cream after dinner or whatever that might be. And changing that approach to, I love as much as possible making an external bad guy. So I, as the parent, don't have to be the bad guy. So
Yeah.
I work with families on like, we look up together what are health standards around something, whether that's like sugar, whether that's screen time. So what are the health standards around it? And so then how can I be on my kids' team? Like, oh, this is so annoying. They say for your age, like they being pediatricians, whoever, say for your age that this is the healthy amount. I'm on your team. How could we work together on dealing with that healthy amount? Where this ties back to the food as a reward is like still in my gut. There's this piece of me that even though we've looked up and say we've come up with um, a bowl of ice cream a day or that equivalent of sugar is in that like healthy active kid wheelhouse. And I say to my child, like, it says this much. And then my child says to me, well, can I have that bowl of ice cream for breakfast? Or could I have that bowl of ice cream like mid morning or before lunch? And like, my gut reaction is like, no, you have to have it after your healthy food. And so I'm just curious where you stand on that because I think there's still a lot of shame around when we eat certain foods.
Yeah. Yes. So I think you could run an experiment, like have the conversation with your kid, like, that's interesting. Curious how you think you might feel going to school after a bowl of ice cream. Like, I know, okay, I have two thoughts. So ask them, talk through it, and experiment. Like, maybe you let them have ice cream for breakfast because that's what they want. If you're like, sure, let's see what happens. Like, and theoretically, they're not going to want to keep eating ice cream for breakfast. There is a scary, like, well, what if they do?
Mhm.
But yeah, don't know until you try things. And again, usually if you like just let things not affect you or bother you and like let just kind of run with it, then there'll be less resistance over time. And, they could be like, oh, I don't care about ice cream. I know I'm allowed to eat that for breakfast if I wanted. So like, whatever.
Mhm.
Or there's like, the conversation of, I also wish I could eat ice cream for breakfast, but like, unfortunately, that's just not, something that is going to make us feel good in our bodies. And maybe in the short period, but really when you get to school, we want to make sure you have energy, you can focus. And while sugar's so good, it does, as you said, put the external bad guy, like it has that, short-term reward. And then I'm just thinking you might feel pretty lousy running around at recess time if you had a bowl of ice cream. And sort of referring to, yeah, there are social norms around eating that are there for a reason.
Mhm.
So that could be one path you go to. But
Yeah, I love this because I think I heard your two answers, like tying back to things, how have things changed since you've become a parent yourself? Is
yeah,
like the one answer was like, I heard your kind of clinician hat on, where you're like, you know what, we like if we kind of look at the research around this or um, what feedback would like how we approach this from an educational standpoint, it would be let's expose them to it, let's have that collaborative conversation, let's kind of experiment with it for X amount of time where we get that feedback from like how are they feeling. And then I heard like your parent hat one that was like, and I know that if someone told me that as a parent, there would still be a piece of me that doesn't really want to send my child to daycare after eating just a bowl of ice cream and doesn't really want my toddler to feel like it's their job to make decisions right now around
yes,
their health. And so when it comes to the parent hat, we do go, okay, well, it is a value of ours to have sort of healthy, happy kids. So this is a place where I'm going to put a boundary in and take that boundary and externalize it to, you know what? We know that after a bowl of ice cream, even though that's in your healthy realm, you do get this dip. If that dip happens at daycare or at school, I'm worried you're going to miss out on or not enjoy X as much. So, as your parent, we're going to say no to this time. Here's the times when it is possible.
Yeah, yeah.
And if I could tie that back to the like food as the reward question from our audience, I think like what the audience is really asking us too is giving ice cream, like, is dessert a reward? And does that have any impact on our relationship with food if we always look at having dessert? Or should we be looking at it differently as having like our, like what the big guy tells us is okay to have an amount of days spread throughout the day? Like, is there a way that we should be looking at this in a way we shouldn't be looking at it?
I think it's so unique to the family. Like, we do want to have, it's really important to have boundaries when it comes to what you're providing and what your kids are eating. And so it's truly up to you if you want to, if you're okay with serving dessert every day. If you're not, then that's not going to ruin your child's relationship to food at all. If that's, you decide like dessert is a weekend thing, and it doesn't mean it's a reward. Like it's an enjoyable part of food and connection, and obviously it tastes good. So I would just say like it's up to you what you're comfortable with in terms of like frequency,
Mm-hmm.
and then I would encourage it to be a um, like a family thing, like not just, oh, my kids, yeah, you can eat this, you guys can eat cookies, I can't. Like, if I
Mm-hmm.
eat that, da da da. Like, you don't want to be talking about it in like a unhealthy or like disordered kind of way. So like participate together, and then you can role model, oh, this cookie's really good. I'm going to save my half tomorrow. That was so satisfying. That's exactly what I wanted. Or
Mm-hmm.
taking a bite and being like, no, it's just not really, I think I'm full from dinner actually. I'm going to have this tomorrow. So then they know too, like, this isn't our only chance to eat this. I can eat as much or as little as I want of this amount that you've decided. And yeah, really role modeling that positivity around food. Um, Even within that like certain situation, if that.
Yeah, you bring up 2 points there that I realize I've been putting some consequences, so I'm doing air quotes, around like sweeter foods that I've never considered before. One being that if my child doesn't finish it, I tend to throw it out. And
Mm,
that's really pretty upsetting for them. And I'm realizing now, as we're talking out loud, that potentially, and if I put myself in that position and I knew that if I didn't finish the cake or the cookie, it was going to get thrown out, that if I honestly reflect back, I would say that that sometimes pushed me to almost gorge myself on the sweet because I was like, well, this is my only chance.
yeah, totally.
Hmm. And then the second one being, I never really considered that when you're sitting in a group and you say, this is okay for you, but it's not okay for me because of X, Y, or Z, then I'm creating this dynamic of, yeah, food, like this kind of food is only available to you because of the type of body you have, or because like you're creating a weird dynamic around food that I honestly have never thought of until you brought that up.
Yeah, and I've seen that in families where they feed their kids differently based on their body size, or they talk about like, oh,
Okay, themselves as the adult differently.
and like you can have, oh, you and your dad have such great genes, you can eat whatever you want. Like even those conversations can start so early. When it's like, if we're caring about health, we shouldn't be thinking about how is this going to affect your body size. It's like, how's it affecting your insides? And so, yeah, it's a really funny thing of like metabolism. Like, I think that was like such a 90s thing too, of like, oh, you have such good metabolism. I could eat whatever I want. I could eat a whole box of cookies. It doesn't affect me. But it's like, well, it doesn't mean
I
your health
actually just heard this the other day. Like, I think that's still a very,
is still a thing. Yeah.
mm,
Yeah. So, yeah, coming back to your point, like, not throwing away that stuff so they can listen to fullness cues, and every kid's different too. Like, yeah, some kids can have a bite of a cupcake and then they're full and they leave it. Other kids maybe not so much. Like, there's definitely like nuance. But yeah, as another kind of overarching thing is like, as much as you can take like weight, shape, and appearance out of any conversation around food is going to be pretty massive.
what do you say instead?
I would say, yeah, just how, coming back to like how it makes your body feel.
Hmm.
And sometimes we're not, if we always make decisions, food decisions based off of like how food tastes, that might lead us in a direction that doesn't make our body feel good, because we have all these options all the time where they're creating food to be really, really tasty and we want more and more. And, that's exciting, but also it's not something that over time is going to help us like run around the gym a million times, or get strong enough to hike mountains this summer, or things like that. So I guess you're still kind of making that connection and to like health in maybe a not overly positive way. It is really tricky, but I would say to parents too, like, give yourself some grace, because like you're not going to ruin your kid with just like one or two comments. But yeah, no matter what, talking about your kid's weight to them is going to likely have a negative consequence. Like, I think that's very clear.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I'm really loving this. So I think where we'll wrap up today is just going back through these 3 points that our audience really wanted to hear
Mhm.
about, and I'm going to try and summarize them, and please add to them if I'm missing something. But really, in that first one, have things changed for us since becoming parents ourselves? Like, what I'm hearing you say is, before there was really this, okay, we take the research backed approach to how we deal with food. And then since becoming a parent, you're like, you know what? Like, yes, my value is taking this research backed approach within what is available within my capacity for that day. So, and that might not be every single day, or that might not be every single meal or every single interaction. And that's okay. It's okay to sometimes do things that align more with other familial values to help us get through the day. And then I think the next one is with the rewards and punishments around um, food. We're always trying to zoom out. So when we catch ourselves saying, like, you have to finish your meal before you get this, or you have to finish your lunch every day at school, taking that step back and going, okay, what is my big picture value here? So which boundaries am I and limits am I going to enforce, and which ones can I let go of so we have this positive relationship with food? And so that might be, yes, I'm going to hold the limit around not eating sweets for breakfast, but I can be more flexy on if they don't finish their lunch that day, maybe modeling like how we can preserve it to use it again for another day, or um, just letting that go. And if it comes to a meal that they're not finishing, just letting it go. And that's okay
Mhm.
for that. And it's unlikely that it will affect their long term health.
Yeah.
And then lastly, with our food as a reward and using a food as a reward, as much as possible, we kind of want to move away from that. We want to move more to a point of this is something enjoyable. And in best case, we really want it to be something that is done in an environment that feels connecting, that's not separating, that's not showing certain people can or cannot, and that it's just something that we have once in a while to enjoy together.
Mhm. Yes. Yeah, and I think just to add on to that is like think about your own experiences, like for food as a reward, for example. Imagine you're at a dinner with friends and you took a little bit too much mashed potatoes and like everyone's enjoying cake, but you're not allowed because you are too full to finish your potatoes. Like if you think about it like that, you're like, yeah, what a crazy thing, right? Like,
Yeah.
yeah,
Or if you go, and I do hear adults say this a lot, like I had my um like fancy chai tea latte this morning, so I've used up my calories for that sweet, and now I can't have cake. And how, like, as another adult listening to an adult say that, you're like, oh, wow, that's like so difficult that you have to think about that so
mhm,
intensely. And then yet we go home and say, well, you had X, so now you can't have Y. And
yeah,
so how could we approach that differently so that we're not saying this then this? It's like, no, I'm the adult. I'm gonna hold, as your parent, I'll hold the boundary around. We're not gonna have ice cream right now because that evil greater power said this is a healthy amount of sugar, and so we're going to save that so that you can have that at the party with your friends. Or we're going to say this is one day of a month where, yeah, maybe you're going to have over that expectation, and we're just going to let it go.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think, and not to make this way longer than it's meant to be, but um, I think, and I use this more with adults, is like if you struggle with cravings all the time throughout the day, think about sugar, just thinking about like, when am I really going to value this? Like, when do I have time to sit down and enjoy it? When is it going to be most satisfying?
Mhm.
Because, yeah, if we have like fresh baked cookies, when you're making your morning coffee, like that seems pretty appealing, but is that going to be like the most desirable time? Like, do you think there's another time in the day where, yeah, it's going to
Was
like,
it after the kid, after like when your kids have gone to bed, you finally get to be alone. There's gonna be no distraction. You're like, ah.
yes, exactly. So with kids too, like, oh yeah, ice cream for breakfast. But you know what? After school, we're gonna go for a bike ride, which will be really nice. We're gonna get warm. Like, do you think there's other times of the day where maybe that bowl of ice cream might just be a little bit more enjoyable?
You're not going to be rushed afterwards or mhm.
Yeah, exactly.
I like that approach.
Yes.
Is there anything that you wish to add as final thoughts? I think we've touched on our 3 points of how things have changed since becoming parents and really showing that you've brought a lot more flexibility into how you approach eating as a family, that rewards and punishments we try and keep out of the food world. And we try instead to go to that big picture of what it is we really want our kids to embrace as a relationship with food. And lastly, like really avoiding using food as a reward. And I guess I just want to wrap this up by saying I just love the work that you do and how you approach things from this um, values based, needs based idea where we look at the whole big picture and not just how do you get a kid to eat spinach kind of idea, not this like in the moment quick fix stuff. And I think that's really what the parents listening to this podcast attached to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think my parting words would be like, you can hold, and like you would know more about this than me for sure, but like you can establish and maintain boundaries around food. I'm not saying like like it probably sounded like sure, let your kid eat ice cream for breakfast, see what happens. But like it is important to have boundaries. Like kids need that. And so you can still practice flexibility and openness around food and not having healthy versus unhealthy, but still create boundaries, healthy boundaries around food and what your kids can have and not have, and coming back to that values piece of what's important. So yeah.
Yeah, just as a very last connection, I'm just going to tie it back to the lunchbox because I think that's one I hear so often. And so if you notice your kid is just eating the bear paw and the gummies and whatever else you've put in the lunch and not touching the other things, instead of labeling them as the good food and the bad food, well, maybe we take out some of those foods that we would prefer them not to eat all of. We minimize them a little bit, like they still exist, they're still part of the lunch, but not enough that a child that age would be completely full if they chose just to eat those. So then they still have a desire to eat when there are other options that we deem as more nutritious.
Yes. Yeah. I think that's a really, really good point.
Okay. If I love the stuff that you put on your social media, I learned so much from it. If someone wants to find you, connect with you, where do they go?
Yes, I try to be active on Instagram. So, Nutrition Fernie is my Instagram handle. I'm always keen to get emails too. So, it's nutrition at gmail.com, which I don't, you can maybe post the,
Yeah, we will share that connection as well, and we'll post this on our Instagram page, and you'll be connected there as well if people want to.
these are my main points of connection. And I'd also be curious from your audience to hear if and when they would like to see another workshop, because I know you and I are keen to, we loved doing the first one. And so we'd be keen to do another one and curious when and like what that would look like to be like most helpful for people listening.
Yes, both live or virtual if you're listening outside of the Southeast Kootenays in British Columbia. Awesome. Thank you so much for coming today, Samara. Have a wonderful day, and I'm sure you'll be getting some more questions coming your way soon.
Yeah, I enjoyed it a lot.
Bye.